Nelson's going to do a bowl for us out of a board.
Thanks, Jim. Well, I'm going to make a bowl out of a board. How many people has any idea what I'm going to do?
Well, I got an idea.
You got an idea.
Well, I'm just going to make a bowl out of a board. It'll just be kind of flat. Here was a board. This is an example. Black walnut, and they're cut the same length. They're about the same length as they are wide, and they're cut in two. The next thing I'm going to do with them, and I can't do it here tonight because we need too many saws and too many things, but my goal is to be able to tell you enough and show you enough that you can come in next week or that you can go home next week and make a bow out of a board. These don't have, this I actually sawed off of there, but you could find any board. They don't even have to be half and half. They don't have to be a board this wide. I'll hold them up. They don't have to be that wide. You can glue a few together. You can glue enough together that you have the whole 12 by 12. If you have a 12-inch lathe, you wouldn't want to go bigger than that. And it don't matter how many pieces, it might look kind of like a cutting board. But anyhow, then saw it in half on your table saw. And there's one thing, we're going to put them back together in pieces. And what's important, there's one advantage of having it all glued together and then saw it in half. Whenever you go to put a piece back, if it isn't sawed perfect, it'll look a little warped. If you have it, and your saw don't have to be accurate. It can be a half degree, it could be a degree off. If you saw this through, no matter what that is, those same two will go back together perfect. So mark it when you do that. Then the next step is, well, there's some other things you can do with it to dress it up a little. To make it a little thicker, I just brought a couple of them along here. Change color. You can make it the same thickness if you want. It's the easiest, I think. I don't want to say it works best, but it's easiest if you end up with a board about 1 inch thick to 1.25 inches. If you get it less than that, and if you're still cutting them at 45 degrees, you end up that you don't have a very wide section to cut your bow out of till you cut some off the out. Some it might make more sense later. But anyhow, you can do things like that. Add something to it. It'll dress it up when it's done. Then the next thing, regardless of what these look like, when you put them back together, and don't matter what colors, kinds, a couple thicknesses, I'm gonna, that piece of tape's a little messed up. I'm just gonna get enough of tape to tape the center together, to hold them there. And the reason I want to hold them there, I'm going to mark circles on here. And the reason I don't put the tape on the whole thing, then you end up with, you don't have your pencil mark going the whole way across. Because we're going to take this to the bandsaw next, or if you have a saber saw. It's just like Steve showed us. You don't have to have everything. Some guys that don't have many tools, or in all walks of tools, building or whatever, they always think that the guy that made something real neat must really have top-notch tools. A lot of times that's not true. Many of the guys that build a top-notch whatever it is also built that top-notch whatever it was with tools a lot less accurate, and so on. But anyhow, what I'm going to do next is make a circle on here. It would have been better if I'd have picked a light colored wood for this. The pencil would make a better mark. I'm just going to mark the center, and it's about 12 inches. So I'm going to put a mark here at 6. I know the center the other way is on my line because I cut them and I know they're both the same, so I don't have to center it that way. I'm going to put that on the center, pull it in till my pencil just hits that edge. And make a circle. Now, when you cut it out of 45, if you have a board 1 inch thick and cut it at 45 degrees, we're going to stack them on top of each other, you'll end up with a side thickness of about 3/4 of whatever this thickness is. That's just roughly. But if you have a board 1 inch thick, you're going to end up with about 3/4 inch wide to work with. Take some off the outside, some of the inside to divide it up. So what I'm going to allow 1 inch, and then I'm going to allow 1/8 of an inch for the saw cut. So I'm going to make it 1 1/8 the next circle in. Everybody know what I'm doing? I'm making circles. I'll try to bring all this together for you, but we had to start someplace. Okay. Now I'm making a circle inside the other one. I'll have to get that one to hold still. Now I'm going to come in another 1 1/8, and depends how little you want it to go on the inside, how many circles you would want to cut with this. I wouldn't cut more than this would be my last one. Have a little bit of a bottom left on it. This is like the beginning of segmented turning. Do you agree with that, Fred? He starts with all pieces. I had to find bigger boards, but there's some little ones left.
Matter of fact, that bolt I brought in for show and tell was that's how I did it, like you did.
Yeah.
Put it in the band.
Now, that's as far as I would go with them. You see the circles I put on there. Now, the first one that I would cut, I didn't do that. I just figured that out more recently. I made the first one of these. Lester and I made one day, probably a year ago. He's made a couple since out at my shop, and I've made some. But when the first ones, what we're going to do now is pull these back apart. And now we're going to go over to the bandsaw, or like I said, you can use a saber saw. Anything, set it to 45 degrees. Cut this first one. I'm lining this up here on top with this, but I'd cut the first one square. Just cut it off, half of it at a time with your bandsaw or saber saw, and cut that off of there. This outside corner part's waste. Then the next one, that's wrong. That'd be the wrong way. You gotta do it like, well, get it. There, got it. Now I'm going to line it up with, well, I'm going to have to square it across first for this half. And turn that. And I'm going to cut this one 45 and this next one 45. Now, at 45 degrees, yeah, I can show you that. If you can see that, the first one we're going to cut square. The next one I have set at 45. Now you see where the bottom of that comes out here? This is, I allowed for a saw cut between these two, but then this one will come over and set right on top of the other. Anyhow, that's how you lay it out and cut them. Do the same thing with the other one. And I want to show you something else while I'm at this same spot. Here's an example of some that I glued together. I can make a 14-inch bow out of that. There's a knot there, but I have that planned to be over at this side, and the circle will take the knot off. And then I'll do the same thing with it, and I'll end up with a couple colors. Now I have one out of oak that's cut, except on this one I didn't cut the outside square. The very first cut was cut on the 45. Now, of course, since they're cut in half, you got these two, and then you glue them back together. And they work like that. Well, I'll have to start with the bottom one. Set that on there. This one on here. Now there's the beginnings of a bow from a board. Yeah. And by using some different kinds of wood, well, first of all, I just said last week when somebody I knew who I saw, where'd he get to there? The little bow you brought in, and I just said to Jim or somebody, I said, now everybody tries to make all these really fancy bows, but sometimes all I like to see is a nice piece of wood turned into a bow that just looks like a bow. Once in a while you say, can't we find just make a bow? But anyhow, you do have a little limited a little bit here because you can only go so far. This was 1.1 thick, or 1.25 maybe. And I cut it at 1.1, which after the saw cut leaves you about 1 inch. But when you go diagonal for the part you're going to be turning to get a bow, you'll have, no matter what thickness you start with, you'll have about 3/4 of that much if you cut it at a 45 to fit. So that's how you get a bow out of it. Anybody have any questions? Pardon?
Stagger your joints?
You can do whatever you want with it. I got one here that's glued together. And a lot of these things I couldn't do here. Besides, it takes a lot of time. And like I said, I think a successful demonstration is one to where the people that watch this can go home and make one like it. And, yeah, do you have a question?
Yeah, when you're done, go ahead.
Oh, right now is fine.
Okay. How are you gluing your segments back together?
Okay, that's a good question. When I put these together, I use, and I was going to bring my clamps. I'll put glue on the ends, obviously, and I like to lay it on a flat board like this. Get it on a flat board. In fact, let me pull one of these out, I can show you better. If I take these two, put on this board, and put them like this, put the glue on there. Now after I put the circles on the board, and before I cut the 45s, I like to get out and put any place, just take your pencil and put a line across it. Gives you a point of reference for when you go back to it. then I line those lines up. Because I cut this one with one cut, this one with another, and they might be off a little, won't matter. But I like to end up putting them at that same spot. And what I'll do is lay them on a board like this, or like this, something that levels them out a little bit, put the glue on. Then I like to take the little clamps, put on here loosely to hold these even, one on each side, and then take one of your 2-foot clamps, any bigger clamp, and put just a little pressure on this to hold it together. And remember, there's more glue joints ends up weak because of over tightening than under tightening, especially if you have a hard kind of wood. I used to build some furniture, and some of the guys had trouble with that. Any wood they glued together, they would think the tighter the better. You're supposed to make sure the joint fits before you glue it, not try to pry it together. But if you do it by cutting a board in two and keeping those angles, they'll fit. Like I said, even if the degree's off, it will fit. And that's all I do, one of them at a time. Well, I do them and then set them someplace, and all 3 or 4 of them, whatever you have, and then you're back to this one. I have a lot of bows I can make when I go back to my shop. I have a lot started. Anyhow, this one was it was also cut in half. It's the 2 halves. Glue it together. I still like to put them clamps on, because especially depending on what tools you have to go to after this. If you don't have a like a drum sander or something to slide these through and make them perfect, you especially want it. That's why. Well, I do have a drum sander, but I still do that. I put a little clamp on each side, tighten them just a little, then put something on to squeeze them enough that it looks right. Don't take a lot of pressure. Then retighten these and set them back. In a half hour, an hour, you can take them off of out of the clamps, but you can't go start working them yet. I always wait to overnight to work on anything. Anyhow, these are all done the same way. They all rank right on there. And after that, I have a drum sander. I take it over, because you have a little bit of glue squeezing out on them. Clean that up, both sides, run it through the drum sander, both sides, get it perfectly smooth. And I do the same thing with these. So there you have the bow. Now, when I learned about making, I just saw it on the internet one time. I looked through there and found stuff, and I thought, boy, that's neat. How many of us don't get into our shop and say, I'd like to make a bow, and what can I make a bow of? You're walking over boards while you're doing it. They don't even have to be a whole board, just slices. Anything you can glue, as long as you're not out of glue and clamps. Clam them together and get started. And so anyhow, I thought it was neat. So I decided to make some, and my biggest question was, how am I going to hold that thing now to turn it? All I have for a bottom is this, and I don't want to screw my faceplate into it. It goes in further, and I want to have screws in it. I only use faceplates on the front of a bow when I make a bow. The faceplate's out here, and you turn the back, and you put your groove or tenon or whatever, however you work with it, and then you put it on your chuck. So, anyhow, there's a way. And I know a lot of you guys have worked all these ways, have done all these things a lot more complicated than this. But like I said, I think it's a good way to start. I don't know if you can call this a segmented bow. Fred wouldn't call it one yet, but we're heading that way, ain't we, Fred? So anyhow, the next thing is now, how we're going to hold it. And the way to hold it, you can do it 2 ways. You can take a bow, glue this all together, and put this on here like this. But sometimes you might not have enough room for that, so I like to do this first. Get a groove in there first. Now how we're going to do it, I bring that in on purpose and let it sit here so nobody can look through all of it for a start. I like to work with the element of surprise. I don't want you to know what's next. Anyhow, now what is next? Now I have a center mark on here, and this is going to be the bottom. And now we would either like a recess and or a tenon so that we can get a hold of it with our chuck. Either one. Done with this. I don't know which is worse, the guy that has to wear glasses all the time or the guy that can see just fine but he has to get glasses out to do everything. Long way. Now for this, since I'm going to be working there, I like this. I don't know how far this one winds out, but I like to keep this back as far away from here as I can. And you do that by widening this out. And I don't know what this goes to, do you know? Mine goes, I think, 4 1/4, and this might go pretty much the same. I don't want to wind it clean out of there. And I'll...
It is about 4 inches.
I figure. Get that one tight and wind this one in. Now, if you don't have a faceplate this size, or if you're making a bow where you need a smaller faceplate, or if you have a lathe that only has a 3-inch faceplate, you could probably get by with that, but we're working on friction alone here, friction between these two. You can always take your faceplate, your little 3-inch faceplate, take a board, make sure it's went through the planer first and it's the same thickness, doesn't really matter, another board I'm saying, and cut it on your lathe, cut it to 6 inches round. Then if it's a slippery board and one board wants to slip in the other, and glue some sandpaper onto the piece you have there. And then you'll have closer to like a 6-inch one, or it's a way to make any other size that you want to. But I'm going to tighten this maybe a little more than I normally do. That looks better. After I was trying that, I thought that ain't the right one. Now, I'm not used to this lathe, so I'll have to take a lesson here.
Pull the red button.
Yeah, it says pull for on. Now, what I want to do is get a groove in there or something so that I can glue these all together. Now I have a chuck here. I would like to use this chuck. I have a smaller one. This would be getting close to the size where I'd want to move down to the smaller one, but I would like, my goal would be to make a groove in there that I can spread this and hold it and have a expansion, or that I can squeeze it together. So I have to be careful I don't get the inside too small, or this will get together before I get a hold of it. So we'll see. I ought to do a little measuring before I start on that. Sometimes I just put a pencil mark on and go from there. I would want to be at about 3 3/4 on the outside. And I'll get an idea what that is. That's about 3. So I'm going to be moving out another 3/8 on each side. That'd be pretty close to the inside. 3. kind of like to get it right since all you guys are watching. Okay. And that's the reason I wound this out as far as I could to give me a little working room here. And then I use a smaller chisel. Three and 3/4 and 3 1/4. We prefer. Well, I might have took that in a little too far already, but the other one looks right. Almost goes in. I ain't sure it will, but if it don't, we'll fix it so it does. Now I've been pounding things up. I have 2 chucks. They're both from Penn State. One of them has the traditional chuck key, and the other one has the square one. There I'm in the compression. I tightened it up and got a hold of the middle one. I only have about a 1/16. That's even closer than I mostly do. I got about a 1/16 there. I can put it in the expansion. Some woods, when you expand them, especially make them really tight, you get a catch, you can tear a piece out. This gives you the benefit of doing it both ways. So that would now get glued together, and I always turn them. I don't know if there's any real reason, but I turn them, but you don't have to. You could line all the joints up. It don't make a big difference. And there it is, what it would look like. Glue it together and put it on, turn a bowl. I have a cherry one here that's glued up. It's already cut, ready to fit my chuck, and it's glued together. Now this one, some of these I made 4 or 5 months ago because it's been a year ago since I decided I was going to make this, so I fooled around with some of them. Then I found out that if it's not as thick, the 45 degree won't set you even on there. So what I got to do now, I got all these here. I got the opposite one out here, so I don't have as much in between there to work on as you might think. I don't have as much as it would appear here. But I'm going to put that on and make a little dirt. I may not finish it. My face plate. Of course, we got 1 1/4 lathe. spindle and a 1-inch chuck. What's this, 12-inch lathe? Oh, okay. Well, I just thought of that right now. All right. I thought I was going to get out of turning this. Got that in. Now this one has plenty of wood. It's a little bit bigger than the other one. I got plenty of wood on the outside here. I wouldn't hesitate in doing the expansion mode and going out, but I wouldn't be so quick to go to that one out unless I used my small chuck and just had a little stub in there. And then I'd have a tendency, since the stub is so little, maybe to move out and hold it on the outside. You get a little more holding from it. I'm going to tell you a story while I'm doing this. A guy was helping his wife one time put something together that she had just bought. You know how that might go. I mean, he was getting tired of telling her, do this, no, don't go like. He said, boy, honey, he said, I don't know how God made anything so beautiful and so dumb. She's quiet for a minute. She said, well, he made me beautiful so you'd love me, and he made me dumb so I could love you. You got to be careful when you pick on your wife.
Yeah.
You can get in trouble before you know it. I think I'll do the outside first. I don't know if I can get out around here to do this. I'm limited. Oh yeah, I'm okay. There's what it runs like now. That ain't too bad of a wobble for gluing a couple pieces together. I mean, it ain't perfect, but that's as good as I get them. You wouldn't want to get too good, right? I mostly use, on the outside, I mostly use one like that. We'll see how fast we can run that. Maybe I better put this on, especially since I'm being taped. Somebody might think I never use this. But it smells good. I could tell you it's cherry if I couldn't see. You can't hear me now, can you, Lee? Pick his helmet for Jim. I'm trying to get it up further, my eyes will look up. Any place that suits Lee. Now, normally, if you can make a decent cut down next to the bottom when we get there, you don't have to do much to this part. You can just let it as thick as it is. Well, you can see how we do it. I'm not going to turn that the rest of the way. There's one thing when you do, when you make a bow out of this, when you're making a bow that's filled in solid in here yet, you try to get your thickness pretty close while you're out here because it starts getting unstable. You still do the same thing with these a little bit, but you're starting out, the whole middle's already out, so you have to go a little more careful as you work with it. But anybody have any questions right now? Pass that one around. That ain't finished. It ain't ready to put the finish on yet, but it's getting close enough that you could finish it up. That should make a real nice looking bow. It's cherry.
You don't use a bow gouge at all?
I do sometimes when I make a regular bow, I do on the inside. But part of the reason I didn't here is because this one especially was off. One of them was a lot higher than the other. And the way I normally use a bowl gouge, I do better using this scraper. But I would probably go, if I finish that now, I would probably get a bowl gouge for inside only and smooth it up. And check the thickness. I didn't even check the thickness. I don't want to run the time out too far. Yes?
One time, somebody had asked earlier about staggering the joints.
Yes.
Good chance of a glue failure doing that because of the different expansions of the wood.
I don't think probably any more than putting them all the same. Some of these guys like Larry, some of these other guys, Jim, what's your answer on that? I know when you have different woods, you can have different expansion, but I don't know if it makes a difference if you line them all up top each other, if you turn them.
I've never had a problem.
Pardon?
I've never had a problem.
I think one thing by turning them, you take away the joints. It's all.
Never line the segments up.
Right. Yeah. Now I want to show you the first one I ever made, the finished one. I'll pass that around.
Nice.
Oh. What kind of wood is that? I don't remember. It's a bow from a board.
What kind of finish did you put on?
That one would, I'm sure, just has friction polish.
Now, the wood has to be real dry then?
Yeah, I wouldn't do this with green wood. Yeah, then you would, well, it wouldn't just warp, something would crack. If you take a bow and don't cut it completely down to size, green, turn it and let it lay back till it dries and then return it. But I don't think you would do that with glued joints.
A noble wax on this?
Pardon?
Or noble wax on this one?
No, I don't think it's on that one. No. Yeah. Now I got one more. That's made out of walnut. This is walnut and maple. Now this one, the difference you see in that one, it has a thin edge. This one was one I cut the way I told you. I cut it, the first cut around the outside I cut square. So then when I put it together, this was hanging out over. And of course this this right here was the same thickness as this. But when I was turning it, my gouge caught and put a groove in that up there. I'll have to just move over a little, right? Don't bows sometimes just design themselves?
Yeah.
That's the only real fun about bows. Compared to making furniture. Everything has to be cut the right length, exactly. Everything's put together, square, level, plumb. And then you put a bow on and you say, I don't know what, I'll just turn it and see what happens.
That's mine.
Pass that one around. Now that one was finished. I just finished at the beginning of this week.
Friction polish.
That one's finished with 2 coats of friction polish. Then I let it dry overnight, and then I buffed it on the Beal buffing system, went through all and put the carnauba wax on it. So that's what that one has on it. Now sometimes I've made some bows and I take them. You don't really know anything about your bow till you take it home. Your wife sees it, or the kids, or somebody, right? Because every bow, when you're done, you say, "Oh, this is nice." I mean, unless it flew apart, you don't tell anybody about those. But you don't really know till you take it home. And I made some bows where this ain't one of them, but I'd not these things, regular blanks. I'd saw them in 2 and put a piece of oak in and a piece of cherry through it and stuff. I'd go home, my wife say, "I don't know why you do all of that with that. That bow been prettier just out of its own wood." But mostly I had explained to her the reason I had a saw in 2, there was a bad spot through the middle. And there was. So anybody have any questions now? So you're all going to make one and bring it in. Now, if you have a 12-inch lathe, make sure you don't start with bigger than a 12-inch piece.
Good job, Nelson.
Thanks. Nice doing it. Thanks.